got that burger, man. It was awesome. I love that place.
Dude, burgers are that's my weakness, man. I can eat, especially the smash burgers.
Dude,
But
they're good.
but nothing beats the goat chop at Aga's.
Fair, fair, dude.
And
They,
Houston has so much good food. Like you can't just I can never keep up with the restaurant scene. And there's always like you go to one restaurant after a long time, and then you get there and you're like, oh, finally I get to try this. And then you read some article or some blogger go to a newer one that opened up. It's like, what? I thought I was like catching up to the restaurants, but you're
I
never
know
caught
you're
up.
already out of style. There's always something new, that's for sure, man.
What are some man? There's so many restaurants, but what are some good couple of restaurants that you've been to recently? What would you say are your top restaurants in Houston?
Gosh, one restaurant that like, even like 10 years ago when I was here for med school, I loved this spot, the Hobbit Cafe. I think they have some of the best burgers in Houston. There's just such a huge variety. I mean, they have like every kind of meat you can imagine. They have the burgers like Greek style with tzatziki in them. They have Mexicans, Southwest style with jalapenos, the standard mushroom Swiss style. All in, the vibe in that place is pretty cool. It's kind of Lord of the Rings themed. All the burgers are named after some Lord of the Rings stuff. You got statues of the movie and book characters. So that the place is just a cool spot. And I mean, they have like over 40 burgers on the menu. All of them are awesome.
Speaking of burgers, I think one of my absolute favorite restaurants in the city is Nancy's Hustle. And Nancy's
I
Hustle,
haven't been there.
dude, it's one of the I'd say it's top five in Houston. And Nancy's Hustle has this burger, which is amazing. But they have other things too. They do interesting stuff. They use like techniques from South Asian cooking, from
Yeah.
Turkish, and they use New American style cooking, and they just use the multicultural makeup of Houston to create the food there. And it's just amazing. They have this thing called the Nancy cakes, which is this fluffy cake that they have, and they put salmon roe on it, and they
Oh
serve it,
man.
and it's freaking delectable. You have to have it.
Dude, I'm getting hungry just thinking about it.
No one can go wrong with Agas. I mean, that's the absolute.
Yeah, August is the OG, that's for sure.
I mean, if you're South Asian, in the U.S., you know about Agas. Like people fly in from other states to go to Agas and and try the goat chop there.
Dude, every time my parents come in to see us from Dallas, I mean, pretty much every time we're getting August.
Yeah, and then the other one that I think both of us have been to is Nobi's.
Nobody's is good.
I really like Nobi's because they do really good. Like they have this the pastas, the breads. That's amazing, and that's one good one. But the other one that a lot of people don't know about, but it's really highly rated. It's called Theodore Rex,
Dude,
and
you talked about that a lot. I haven't checked that spot out.
you have to go to that place. That place
Okay.
has this thing called the tomato toast, and I can't explain it. It's just you have to try it.
It doesn't sound awesome, but I'll take your word for it. I'll have to try it.
Yeah.
Blue Dorn is also a sweet spot. I really like that place.
Dude, Blue Dorn, oh my God. Yeah, so Blue Dorn, I mean, it's a classic steakhouse, but they also have,
They
they
have like
do the
really
classic,
interesting, like that pot pie thing they have. I
the
mean,
lobster pot pie.
yeah, it's so good.
It's so good. The last one I kind of want to hit on is the one we went to together with a group of other friends was Neo.
Oh, dude, the
Yeah.
omakase.
That was one of the best meals I've had this year. You know,
Yeah, that was awesome.
I think we can keep going about the restaurants, but Neo was one I just can't forget sometimes because I was like, when I do want to take Mariam there one of the days because once we're done with the then she's ready to go to the sushi restaurant, then we'll go and we'll have some good
Yeah,
sushi.
yeah, dude. That place was cool. The chef was also awesome. I mean, his
Yeah.
story is really cool. How he traveled all over the world and even met that guy Hiro, the Netflix famous guy Hiro Dreams of Sushi, and learned how to make it. I think that was really cool.
Yeah, the best thing the thing that I like about the new age of restaurants is they're focused on the fresh farm to table food, growing the produce locally, sourcing their food right, and that's a big thing missing in our society, right? I mean, having fresh unprocessed food, making the pasta from scratch, using the right kind of ingredients because obesity has been on the rise since you can say like in the past 50 years 60 years the rise of processed foods in our country has made it really difficult for people and people have gained and ballooned up. It's
Like crazy, man. Yeah, I mean, our whole society, like the rates of obesity and overweight, even not just obese but overweight. I mean, they've skyrocketed. Like 50% plus of the population is overweight.
yeah the food quality. I mean, the stuff that we grew up eating, I sometimes look back and see like I knew kids were eating Lunchables for lunch at school. And remember Lunchables? That's the most processed thing,
It's like such garbage food.
right?
And
The
like all those
cereal,
snacks like fruit roll-ups and Gushers and Frito-Lay chips.
the cereals that we
Yeah.
grew up eating. I mean, Lucky Charms and the Cocoa Puffs and you know
Cinnamon Toast Crunch, all of them. I mean, yeah, it's
just highly processed, and there's no doubt. I mean, look at the way society is. I mean, people have gotten obese. People are less active. They're sitting in front of the computers. They're gaining weight now. I do like the trend of this new trend over the past few years of people trying to take care of more of their health, and I think a lot of online media and online podcasting and has a huge role to play in people focusing on their health. And sometimes people can be misled as well, right?
yeah, they certainly can. I mean, people are definitely more interested, and there's these alternate forms of media that are making it more public. People are very keen to take their health and their fitness and all of this stuff into their own hands. And there's a growing sense of like avoiding processed food. Kind of what a lot of these restaurants that we were talking about do. They make it from scratch. They take pride in the preparation of the food and sourcing it from wholesome ingredients. Um, it's all about the same trend, about being
Yeah.
healthy and
You know,
avoiding excess weight gain.
Excess. Yeah, obesity is a trillion-dollar industry, man. And now with the advent of new obesity treatments, I think it's the exciting space. As a cardiologist, it's very exciting for me. I've been working with a lot of these medications over the past 3 years, 4 years as soon as I begin, and I feel like I've been on the cutting edge of things where I would get introduced to a lot of these new medications that are targeted towards weight loss just because of my work in cardiology and in clinical research. So it's a very exciting time for me because I'm learning a lot. We're learning together as a society of what these medications do as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. Everyone has heard of these drugs like Ozempic and Mounjaro and stuff, even though they may have initially been created for diabetes and blood glucose control. They've basically mass market appeal for weight loss, and it's not just weight loss. I mean, it's control of your metabolic state, right? And I mean, I think it's fascinating. I see it in, as an orthopedic surgeon, so many of my patients are on it. People have lost tremendous amounts of weight, and it's not just like the actual amount of weight that's lost. There's so many effects that it has on your brain, on satiety, on appetite, all of that stuff. I mean, talk a little about that, Humayun. Like, what do you think when a patient comes to clinic? Just taking like a real life example. Like, when would you suggest or talk to a patient about a medication, like for instance, Ozempic or any of these? There's so many different types.
Yeah. So, a big part of cardiovascular health that I think we've talked about in the past is metabolic disease. And metabolic disease is your waist
Yeah.
circumference. Not as much as BMI. I think BMI had been for a long time a target of way to measure your weight against your height and see are you obese or not. But many people have large amounts of muscle and their BMI might be higher, right? But I think waist circumference is turning out to be a bigger indicator of your cardiovascular health, where waist size over 36 inches can be high risk. People who have metabolic induced fatty liver, right? People who have metabolic disease, and because of that, they have fat accumulating around the liver that's causing liver dysfunction, and that's one of the most frequent causes of liver disease now. Things like high triglycerides and high lipids that's causing a lot of cardiovascular disease. And because of obesity, people are developing insulin resistance, which is a precursor to diabetes. When you start developing insulin resistance, it's a cycle that leads you to becoming a diabetic, which comes with a whole host of diseases afterwards, including retinopathy, which is your retina getting disease, neuropathy, cardiovascular disease, which is vascular disease. So that's when I see patients kind of inching towards metabolic disease or have metabolic disease and inching towards these end stage diseases. That's my first indication that hey, we have these medications now that I can urgently use to kind of reverse them and pull them back from where they're heading towards. So for me, it's been a great tool, and a lot of my patients have benefited. Man, I can't. I mean, we still don't know the long-term effects of some of these medications. I mean, they've been around for a long time, so we have a good idea they're overall safe, but they're not free of side effects, right?
Yeah, no, and so I'll jump in there for a moment. I think that's really interesting that, in terms of how you think about these meds for your patients, how you prescribe them, how you talk to your patients about them, it's really focused more on the metabolic aspect rather than purely the weight loss. Even though that's kind of the hot button and the hype topic is how much weight loss can I get? Can I lose weight? Is this a tool for me just to get more fit, to shed those last little bit of pounds? More so is the potential positive metabolic effects. The weight loss is obviously a plus, but it's not even necessarily the primary effect.
Yeah. So you know the story about how these medications were discovered. I mean, people have known about the GLP-1 receptor for a while, right? But the hardest thing was to find the analog that would activate that receptor. And the way you know it's funny, the way they found out was there's a type of animal that's called Gila monster. It's in the southwest region of the U.S. or in Mexico, and they find that, and they noticed that the Gila monster only ate few times a year, and it survived in those harsh conditions without having to eat too much. And when they isolated some of the venom that the Gila monster has, they found that there are GLP like there's a chemical that could activate the GLP receptor, and that was the precursor to the first type of GLP-1 medication that was produced. It was called Byetta, right? And the Byetta was the first type medication where initially it was for diabetes, for glucose control, but then they started seeing some weight loss with that medication, the appetite suppressant nature of that medication, and that eventually led to the formation of semaglutide. You know, there were some
That's
other there were other
that's awesome that
medications.
like like translating this stuff from an animal model. I mean, there's so much research involves rats, mice, dogs, things like that. But like studying it and seeing something that's totally different and then applying it to this, like that Gila monster poison, I think that's fascinating. This is something that's funny. So when I was a little kid, a Gila monster is like a lizard that lives in the desert, right? When I was a little kid, like I don't know, 2, 3, whatever years old, we were sitting at the table. I had a little placemat, and my parents wanted to make it fun. So one of the placemats I had was desert animals, and it had like desert hares with the long ears, desert falcons, and then one of the animals on there was a Gila monster. And I'm a little kid. I was like 2.5, whatever. And my parents at the time only spoke to me in Urdu at home, so I didn't know any English until I went to kindergarten. And it was every animal's name was on there, and it was spelled Gila. And I thought it was like my parents at the time they didn't know either. They thought it was Gila monster. And so I learned the name Gila monster, and Gila in Urdu means wet. And I thought like forever when I was a little kid, I was like, Gila monster? It's always wet. It's just like there's water everywhere. It's in the desert. I didn't understand it. And I was just looked at my mom and I was like, Gila monster? Both Gila hota hai? Like it's very wet. And I would like be wiping it with the tissue every time I sat at the table with that placemat. So the Gila monster has made a full circle in my life. It's now it's now brought up in
you're,
my podcast.
you're talking about it in your podcast, and it's a medication that cancels a lot of your surgeries.
I know it. Yeah, no kidding, man. No kidding. The Gila monster is the culprit, leading
Yeah,
to
man.
surgical cancellations. That's something too. I mean, this is like a fight with the anesthesiologist sometimes. You have a patient who needs surgery, like I'm doing a shoulder replacement or something. And a patient's on Ozempic or Manjaro or one of these medications. And new guidelines are coming out all the time. And I feel like every hospital has different guidelines. Every individual anesthesiologist the day of has a different opinion on, oh, you need to stop this one 5 days before, this one 7 days before, this one 2 weeks before. It's like, how long? I mean, how long is that potential delayed gastric emptying and all that stuff? I mean, do we even know? Since these are short acting, long acting, they're very different medications.
Yeah, they started noticing as the these medications grew, they started noticing that people were having a little bit of increased aspiration events because, when the stomach transit, the transit of the food is slow through the stomach. If they even had not eaten after midnight, they still had some residual food left over, and that could lead to aspirations after anesthesia. But we've been saying these names, and there's a lot of confusion about these names and what is Ozempic, what is Monjaro, what is Wegovy, what is Zepbound. So Let's talk about what these medications are. These are incretin based therapies. Incretins are different receptors or molecules that are present in the body that are activated or produced in response to food or nutrition coming through the stomach or the small intestine, right? So there's four major type of incretins that we've been targeting lately, and one is a GLP, right? One is GIP, one is amylin, and there's a few other, uh, incretins, but most of the medications have been kind of towards targeting either GLP, GIP, or amylin, and most of them are activating these receptors. The GLP-1A is like semaglutide, right? Semaglutide is purely a GLP-1 agonist, and it activates the GLP-1 receptor, right? Now, semaglutide, in its generic form is semaglutide, but there's a diabetic form of it, which is called Ozempic, right? And the semaglutide's weight loss version, which was marketed towards just weight loss and not for diabetics, is Wegovy, is the same exact compound. They're not any different. Same liquid. If you broke the pen and took out the compound, it's the same exact thing. It just marketed the same way. The semaglutide is Wegovy and Ozempic. Now the other one is tirzepatide, which is a GLP-1 agonist. It activates GLP-1 receptor just like the semaglutide, but it's also a GIP agonist. And it activates two different types of receptor. GIP is another receptor that works in glucose metabolism and satiety, where it tells your brain to stop eating because you're full. It has some effects directly on fat metabolism as well. So that's one of them. So that's tirzepatide, and tirzepatide has two commercial forms the way it's sold, and there's one called Zepbound, which is purely for weight loss. That's what it's marketed as, not that it's a different compound. And the other one's Monjaro. So the two major ones on the market right now are semaglutide and tirzepatide, and these two brand names are one targeted towards weight loss and one targeted towards uh, the diabetes portion of it. Now, each of those medications, the semaglutide has an oral form called Rybelsus, and the tirzepatide also has an oral form coming up called orforglipron. So that's the two major ones. One is produced by Novo Nordisk, and one is produced by Eli Lilly. And that's been a big fight lately of who's our they've been the biggest competitor in this space. Where is Novo Nordisk going to win? Is Eli Lilly going to win? So that's
Yeah,
kind of
no,
the
that's
big.
really interesting. I mean, because we hear these names all the time, right? Like patients on one versus the other. It's like, is there a benefit? Is there not? Is their side effect profile different? Is their weight loss different? And it's interesting to know, I mean, the actual receptors they act on and potentially act on multiple receptors because, we're using these terms like agonist, antagonist. Agonist is just something that mimics a molecule and acts similarly at a receptor. That's really what an agonist is. And a lot of this whole pathway about fullness and regulating weight loss that all these medications act on. Obviously, they act in our gut, our intestine, in an incretin fashion, like Humayun was talking about, to stimulate these receptors. But they also affect the speed at which your gut empties its food. And that has big consequences because there's a lot of stretch receptors inside of our gut. And when those stretch receptors, they're neurons. You have, what's crazy to think, you have as many neurons in your gut as you do in your entire spinal cord, which is kind of wild. But the gut nervous system, the enteric nervous system, is remarkable. And so when these stretch receptors you are consistently full, the gastric emptying is slowed, and it expands and it remains expanded, it sends a signal through those enteric neurons up to the brain to stimulate satiety. Another thing that stimulates satiety, right, is that especially with these more long-acting medications, these peptides, they can cross into the brain and they can stimulate directly the receptors in the brain for satiety as well and control of your appetite. That's why it's not just the fact that you're losing weight, you're actually not feeling hungry on these medications, and it's even stimulating beyond just satiety and feeling full and not having an appetite. It's stimulating how much pleasure you derive from appetite, and that's something I've found very interesting when reading about these medications is the positive feedback that we get. Right, you eat something that's delicious, you enjoy it, you want to eat more of it. It's a very common thing, but it somewhat eliminates that, and it can make a lot of things that are formerly addictive not addictive. Like that. That's an interesting note with these medications that even people that are smokers, like cigarette smokers, it's actually been noted in a lot of studies that people stop smoking who are on these medications because that similar brain loop, that similar stimulus and positive feedback cycle you get, these medications act on that and they stop that or they diminish it. I thought that was very fascinating.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I have a lot of, patients that I've started these medications on, and initially, the feedback that I get from a lot of them is, hey, I just, just food is not as exciting anymore for me. A lot of people say that I don't have the food noise. Like some people were like, hey, before I used to eat my breakfast and I would start thinking about what I would have for lunch, and now I just don't, those thoughts don't cross my mind anymore. So it suppresses that food noise as well, right? Now, same goes for a lot of addiction pathways where, you know, since it's suppressing that desire for food, it does. I have noticed a lot of people have cut down on their smoking quite a bit. They tell me, "Hey, cigarettes are just not as exciting for me anymore. I'm not craving it as much more." Alcoholism, people have reported to me personally in my experience that, hey, I don't drink as much anymore based on that. Now, the side effects of that as well, some people do get depressed on these medications. Sometimes there's not clear. I mean, through the trials, there's a lot of careful monitoring of people's mental health, and a lot of people with severe depression are excluded from the trials. But people do feel a little sad because before they used to get the pleasure out of the food that they used to enjoy, and sometimes maybe that was one of the few daily pleasures of their life, and now they don't have that anymore. So that sometimes can make some people sad, and these are just more anecdotal findings as well.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, the positive effects are certainly there in terms of metabolic control, weight loss, and even suppression of some of these addictive potential things like smoking or even getting addicted to eating excess food, right? Gluttony. But the side effects are concerning, right? Like, if you read the side effect profile of any drug, the fine print, you can start getting worried. But there's something that I think is relevant and happens to a lot of patients on these is sarcopenia, right? Muscle loss, losing lean mass in addition to just the desired weight loss, in addition to just fat weight loss. What have you seen with that when you have patients on this? Like, what
Yeah,
realistically is the amount of weight loss? What do you talk to people about in terms of their muscle mass and maintaining muscle mass while on these drugs?
yeah, that is the case, and in the large scale studies, they do studies where they measure body lean mass through DEXA scans as well, and a lot of studies are done that way with people take these medications and then they lose weight and their bone mass and muscle mass is measured through DEXA. And from my understanding and some of the reading I've done is of the trial is through semaglutide there was around 33% lean mass loss. The total amount of fat loss, or total amount of weight loss, out of that 33% was lean mass loss or non-fat loss, right? With tirzepatide, it seems to be a little lower. Around 25% of it was a non-fat loss as well. Um, Now, what I've seen and through the clinical trials, with semaglutide, there's around a 14 to 15% body weight loss, a little less, maybe 13 to 14% loss. And in diabetics is a little less than that. With tirzepatide, you're seeing sometimes anywhere from 17 to 20% loss in non-diabetics, and a little less that in diabetics as well. So tirzepatide does have a little extra weight, increased weight loss, and a little less non lean mass loss as well. What they've done in the past is they've done studies in they did studies with GLP-1, and it showed that GLP-1 by itself causes a significant amount of weight loss. Then they studied the GIP alone, GIP agonist by itself, and the weight loss was there, but not as much. But when they combined them, the weight loss of them together was very synergistic, and it was much more enhanced than just each of them alone.
So
Um,
what do you think could be some strategies to prevent that? Like from the musculoskeletal perspective, obviously the muscle loss is concerning because muscle loss is very dangerous for overall body health and your frailty index. And muscle loss is going to lead to skeletal failure, a fracture, right? Because it's going to lead to bone mineral density loss. There's some studies, again, this is not consistent. Some studies haven't shown any real link between like osteoporosis and these meds, but some have. And I think just in general, a lot of patients are not on them for long enough yet. A lot of these medications are newer and they keep coming out in newer forms. So maybe it's just time will tell. And maybe the patient population is not yet old enough to get real florid osteoporosis while on these meds. But it's a worry I have, and I wonder how to counsel patients who are on these medications for good reasons. Metabolic control and weight loss is a good thing. How to maintain your lean mass and selectively lose or try to selectively lose fat.
Yeah, that's a true concern. I always have a conversation with my patients that when I put them on these medications, they're gonna promise me and we'll have a check-in about strength training, every week or every time we do dose escalation. I really want them to do strength training, weight training. Now, I don't know if that's helpful. I mean, it is helpful. We know strength training is helpful. I don't know if it's counteracting the effects of the lean mass loss from these medications yet. And honestly, we don't know the answer. There's a lot of, and I go to a lot of conferences and I do a lot of clinical trials with these medications, and we don't have the exact answers of what that means long term, right? Some of the other things to consider when you counsel patients, I mean, any kind of neuroendocrine tumors that they've had, medullary thyroid cancer or any kind of pancreatic cancer is a complete contraindication, and you should not, if you have any history of men1, men2, the multiple endocrine neoplasia disorders, you should not take these medications. Likewise, if you have any history of pancreatitis or chronic pancreatitis, you should not be on these medications. If you've ever had inflammation of the pancreas, that's excluded. Anyone who's too frail, too weak, already has osteoporosis, I try to avoid these medications in them because I don't want them to have that significant weight loss. But
Yeah.
there are things being done to counteract that in the future. Some of the so we talked about the GLP-1, GIP. So GLP-1, by itself can increase the insulin in the body, so it lowers your blood glucose, right? It decreases your appetite, it decreases your gastric emptying, right? The GIP itself, it does have a little effect on fat metabolism. So it is a little bit more targeted towards the fat. So when you have the GLP combined with the GIP, that's why you see a little bit more fat loss. Now
And
the
do
third
those medicines, do those then, the ones that are combined, do they also have less lean mass loss, or it's
Yeah,
it's not a change on lean mass?
no, no, it is. So that's what I was saying.
Okay.
Tirzepatide is around 25% compared to semaglutide's 33%
Okay.
lean mass loss. So the GLP, GIP medications have a little bit less lean mass, and I think it's getting better. Now,
That's good. So they're basically able to make them more selective, and that's where the research is going, right?
it is. And then the other receptor that, we talked about amylin as well. There are medications. Novo Nordisk is coming out with a medication where they're combining semaglutide with cangritide, which is amylin agonist, where they're targeting the amylin receptor, and that possibly has less side effects of nausea and gastric emptying. Possibly, we don't know yet. Some of its early studies, and possibly less muscle loss as well. But the other promising medication is retatrutide, and retatrutide is it's GLP-1 agonist, GIP agonist, and glucagon agonist, where it directly targets the glucagon receptors, and glucagon has a direct effect in fat metabolism, a much more faster. It uses fat as energy rather than using your protein as energy or carbohydrates in the blood or sugars. So that medication does possibly tend to have a little bit less fat loss as well, or less lean mass loss as well. So
Interesting.
I
Okay,
think
so by hitting that, it basically tries to select out more for fat loss, which I guess that makes sense. I mean, glucagon, to bring it back to a little high level, I mean, glucagon is basically a hormone that's released kind of in the starving state, right? A state of, we call it starvation, but when you're fasting or you haven't eaten for a while and your body needs energy stores, so it selectively will be released when the glucose is low. And it leads to fat metabolism, like the beta oxidation of fat. So that's pretty cool that they can selectively target that
yeah.
and kind of shifted more towards fat loss and less towards kind of general mass loss.
Exactly. So that's why it's a little exciting. Now, in my experience, I am doing a lot of trials with retatrutide as well. Some the fat loss is pretty profound, and people are losing a significant amount of weight, but it does come with a little bit more side effects, and that's the big issue that I've noticed is the weekly injection and taking that medication and having nausea for at least 1 or 2 days a week, is can be very taxing on some people, and maybe after a year and a half of doing the medication, they get tired.
And let me ask this: so how bad is that nausea? I mean, is it bad to the point that they're having to take medications like Zofran or something to mitigate that, or is it mostly just you kind of just feel uncomfortable, like a nauseous feeling, and you're not really vomiting? I mean, how bad is that side effect?
Yeah, so for some people that side effect can be pretty significant, and some people don't even feel it, right? So for some people, the side effect can be just a little bit of nausea when they see you take a little bit, eat a little bit of food. Maybe one day of feeling a little tired, a little under the weather, but then that gets better with taking Zofran or eating a little bit more high fiber diet, smaller meals rather than big, large, fatty meals. And that's a part of the counseling that we do, where we talk about, hey, make sure you're eating small meals that are high in fiber, high in fruits and vegetables, less greasy, less fatty foods. Right? Some people just have minor side effects, but some people have pretty significant side effects. I've had people I've seen in the hospital that have ended up there because they just couldn't stop vomiting.
Wow, that'd be
And
terrible.
unfortunately, a lot of the side effects that we're seeing is from a lot of these compounded medications that have been distributed in the market. There are some pharmacies that are compounding these medications, especially with semaglutide and tirzepatide. Compounded mixed with B12 or some other things. And some pharmacies are doing a good job compounding and their medications are effective, but some are not, and it's not being regulated, right? There's no body that's regulating those. These are not FDA approved compounded medications, and they're being given to patients. And sometimes these patients have severe side effects. And I can tell you, almost always when I've seen a patient end up in the hospital in the ER, it's with a compounded semaglutide or a compounded
Right, right. That kind of begs the question of cost too. I mean, a lot of these medications are very expensive, and it's a question: does insurance cover it or not? What is the so-called indication for the medication? And a lot of people get these from other countries. Like I remember when I was on vacation a few months ago. I went to Cabo with my wife and son, and we were just at the airport, and one of the little local kiosks at the airport was selling. I think I can't. I think it was Manjaro. It was one of these medications, but I think it was Manjaro specifically. Um, and dude, people were buying them like crazy. I mean, people had bags that they were taking with them because it was so cheap there in comparison to trying to get it here in the U.S. And after I saw that, I like talked to a bunch of people. Like I just remarked on it that I thought this was an interesting phenomenon. And people were saying, "Oh yeah, I know people that do that. Like that's a thing. Like they will go on purpose to places like Mexico or Turkey or wherever to get these meds and then come home and either use them themselves or I mean I guess sell them. You can call it black market, whatever. But I mean, whenever there is a overpriced item, especially with early research, right? Things are always more expensive. People are going to try to subvert it and do what they can.
Yeah, I mean these medications are extremely expensive. A lot of my patients want to do cash pay, and a lot of times cash pay can be anywhere from $350 a month to $500 a month for the directly from the pharmaceuticals, Eli Lilly or Novo Nordisk selling them directly to the patient. They can be around $500 a month. Now, the compounded ones can be sold from anywhere from 175 to some people I've even seen paying way more than the actual medications, like
Wow.
650 or $700 a month, because they just don't know. They just are getting told by a lot of these physicians or pharmacies that, hey, this is my semaglutide and I'm selling it and this is effective. And I'm not gonna lie, there are some very effective ones, and there's people that have lost a lot of weight on some of these compounded medications, but it's unreliable. And now people are also starting to sell the compounded retatrutide, which is in phase 3 trials, but we don't even know the long-lasting effects from large-scale clinical trials, but is being sold as a compounded medications in some of these pharmacies.
Yeah, I guess they're capitalizing on people's like desire for a rather quick result, right? Most people that are buying this are doing it for weight loss, that are not getting it through their physician. They just want to see results. I mean, they're maybe unaware or they don't care as much about the potential side effects.
Yeah, the side effects is, a lot of these online websites like Hims or Hers, some other, there's one called Fellas, and All you have to do is answer a few questions online, and you can get your compounded semaglutide or tirzepatide in the mail. But I
Yeah.
personally advise my patients against that
You know,
because
it's
these
kind of like
compounds.
a similar thing with like marijuana dispensaries. You know, I don't know, like 10 or so years ago, those were just kind of coming out, maybe even more than 10 years ago, but you would go in and you see kind of a doc in the box. You answer a couple questions. Oh, are you depressed? Or oh, are you lethargic? Whatever. Oh, you're in chronic pain. Okay, here is a prescription now for medical marijuana. It was just like a dime a dozen, and you have a BS survey that checks off the so-called boxes needed to legally prescribe it. It's a similar thing.
Yeah, yeah, but that weekly nausea and weekly just feeling like the first day after you take it, just feeling a little tired, nauseated, that just takes a toll on it. So there's an interesting medication, and I'm also part of some of the clinical trials for that is through Amgen, and Amgen is creating this medication which is once a month. It's a once a month weight loss medication, and interestingly, it's a GLP-1 agonist with a GIP antagonist. So it inhibits the GIP receptor, which has had similar effects and pretty significant, profound weight loss. But the interesting part is, through some of the clinical trials, the nausea only lasts a couple of days on the first dose, but then the whole month you have the continued weight loss, which is kind of exciting. It's Amgen is a company that's been big into creating antibodies. It created a medication called Repatha, which as cardiologists we use that in for cholesterol lowering therapies in people who've had heart attacks. And since they have this expertise in antibodies, they have this antibody backbone that's attached that allows it to stay in your body much longer, right? And that way you can have it in your body for 1 month, and you take it once a month, and it has a similar weight loss to the other medication. So what I tell my patients is semaglutide, tirzepatide, where it was iPhone 1 and iPhone 2, and and now you're
It was
about
the
to
iPod Touch.
iPod Touch, and you're about to see the explosion in this market where there's all these types of companies that are working on so many compounds. I know AstraZeneca is working on it. There's Viking Therapeutics. The Chinese have gotten into the game as well, and they have come out with their obesity medication as well. So there's a lot of exciting work going on in this space, and this is
Yeah.
just the beginning of obesity treatment.
I mean, I think it's fascinating. You know, the other interesting thing I think is like when you talk to people about this, a lot of people are curious, like why it has to be injected. You know, and now more oral medications are coming about, but like even when GLPs were first identified, I mean, this was in like the early 1900s, not long after insulin itself was discovered. GLPs were known. They just couldn't stay around. They were very short acting because they're just short little peptides. They're nothing but little chains of protein molecules. That's
Yeah.
all these things are. And you just couldn't stick, they couldn't stick around. And so you couldn't actually have them exert a reasonable enough effect, hit that threshold level needed to actually have something meaningful occur. And that's what a lot of this pharmaceutical research has been, is creating these longer acting medications that now can last long enough, their half-life is long enough that they can hit enough of those receptors to now exert an effect. And since they're peptides, that's a big problem too, taking it orally, because when you eat anything, your stomach acids denature, meaning they destroy the protein molecules. And so these medications that go through your mouth and your gut, by the time they actually get to wherever they could exert an effect, they're toasted. So that's why a lot of them have to be injected into the bloodstream. Lot like Humayun, you're mentioning, these new oral medications obviously have found ways around that, which is nice, so the patients don't have to stick themselves once a day, once a week.
Yeah, yeah. The oral medications are usually once, it's a pill form, and the two big ones is one of them is already on the market. It's called Rybelsus, which is oral semaglutide, and it's being used mainly for diabetes treatment. But there is a little tiny bit weight loss component to it, anywhere from 6 to 8%, and the orforglipperon, which is being produced by Eli Lilly, and that has a pretty significant weight loss, not as much as the injectable form, but a lot of people are thinking about these pills as a possible future maintenance therapy for people who do lose weight. Because one thing with these medications is once you stop using them, the weight does come back.
Yeah, the rebound effect, right?
The rebound effect is much longer. Now, interestingly, the rebound effect from semaglutide was a little bit faster. Now with tirzepatide, a little slower, and with this new some of from what I've read and some of these Amgen medication, the longer acting medication, the last in your body a little longer. The rebound effect is a little slower, so the medications that are lasting in your body a little longer have a longer half life. They do last a little longer, and the weight loss is not as much. But I see the potential of these oral weight loss medications as a maintenance therapy in the future, where people can take a pill once they've lost that weight to maintain that weight instead of having to inject themselves constantly. So that's exciting. And some
Yeah, no, that is. You know, one thing that that's interesting just to think about. I don't know the answer or what it is, but like insulin in general is an anabolic hormone. Like it builds up your body. It can lead to weight gain, but it also is a critical component for muscle gain. In fact, one of the most common cocktails for professional athletes or bodybuilders and stuff that these so-called take steroids, right? That's the common phrase. But when people are on those, they usually it's a cocktail of testosterone, growth hormone or IGF-1, insulin, and then erythropoietin. The last just being increasing red cell mass so that you can carry more oxygen in the blood. But insulin is critical. It's needed in order to build muscle. And I find it fascinating that all of these medications, being incretins, they by definition agonize, they stimulate the receptor to increase insulin production. But at the same time, you're still getting loss of your lean mass. And I think that's an interesting phenomenon that maybe there's some amount of threshold level needed or that it's missing to hit the muscle gain or anabolic effect of insulin and is just able to stimulate enough to keep the glucose in check, but not let it go above a certain amount. I don't know. I mean, I think it's interesting the way to think about it.
Yeah, in my experience, people who are injecting insulin, they tend to gain much more fat, gain weight. Weight loss is much harder when you're on insulin. But there are medications being developed now that do completely suppress the weight loss, and their early trials. That's why I said it's iPhone 1 and iPhone 2 right now. There's exciting medication. There's a medication called bimagrumab, and it's somewhere in the phase 2 clinical trials, and what it's doing is it's targeting the activin receptor, and what that prevents is muscle loss. And they've seen that medication being combined with some of these GLP-1 agonists, and this is showing a purely fat loss with maybe some muscle gain component to it as well. So that is a very exciting prospect. I know we
That
talked about
sounds
it
like the
earlier.
holy grail.
It is
Lose
the holy
fat,
grail.
gain muscle by taking a pill.
It is the holy grail, but nothing. What I've realized in the practice of medicine is there's no such thing as free meal, and there's always some kind of
There's no magic bullet.
there's no magic bullet. But who knows? Maybe this could be. I do think there's a lot of long term effects of it, especially with the concerns with bone loss, weight loss, nutritional deficiencies. A lot of people are losing a lot of weight, and they're not maybe taking the right kind of nutrition. Like you've seen that in those patients that go through the bariatric surgery, right? I mean, some of those patients do really well. They get off all their other medications, they lose tons of weight, but some people just keep losing weight and they become severely nutritionally deficient. A lot of them have B12 deficiencies and folic acid deficiencies. They get severe anemia.
Yeah, frailty is a big risk, especially those patients that lose massive amounts of weight after bariatric surgery. That's for sure.
So, have you come around people who've had bariatric surgery in the past and what their bone quality looks like and what their muscle quality looks like? I mean, have you noticed that in your practice at all?
Yeah, I mean, patients after bariatric surgery, quite a few of them, I won't say most or all, but a lot of them who have had a history of bariatric surgery, they can become quite osteoporotic. It just affects your stomach and your gut's ability to absorb adequate amounts of nutrition, right? Because it just eliminates your ability to intake your calories. And patients can get very protein malnourished and protein deficient. And protein, as we know, is the building block for the muscle, and muscle is critical for skeletons to maintain their bone mineral density. So, yeah, I mean, you see that a lot. Patients that have prior bariatric surgery, now they have a fragility fracture.
Yeah. Yeah, so I worry about that, right? With these people that might be on it for a long time, lose tons of weight, and might develop some nutritional deficiencies, unless they can get the right kind of weight loss, right kind of nutritional counseling as well. The other concern is the concern for gastric paralysis. I mean, is that a point at some point where we continue taking these medication over 10, 15, 20 years? At some point, would our gastric emptyings really slow down and cause us to develop gastroparesis? I don't know the answer to that yet.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, right? Like, could basically like your stomach, I mean, it's a muscle. Could it atrophy? It gets so delayed and so conditioned to be slowed in emptying. Could it actually atrophy in some way? And I mean, that would be a big problem.
Yeah, and with that, I always have an exit plan with my patients where we talk about this when we're starting. That hey, eventually want to get you off these medications, and maybe once you get to your target weight loss, maybe let's kind of decrease the dose and maybe decrease the frequency of these medications as well, and see maybe we're taking it maybe once every 2 weeks, once every 3 weeks to kind of maintain that weight loss, and maybe you continue to exercise, build those good habits, do strength training, build muscle, do cardio as well, and build the good habits to sustain that weight loss, so we can maybe completely get you off the medication. Because I personally don't want anyone to be on the medication for the rest of their life. Now, what at some point it might get to a point where we're only taking these medications every 6 months or every once a year, and that's sustaining us throughout the year, and that might be a good option because obesity it is a disease. We know that some people can eat a lot of food and not gain fat and not get fat, and some people can sometimes be on the perfect diet and not lose weight. And obesity primarily is a disease. For some people it's very hard to control, and obesity brings on more you need to eat your the leptins are suppressed, and that you don't get full as fast, and you keep
Yeah.
craving food. So we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, I mean, obesity really is just like a disease that causes a failure of your metabolism. Like you can't regulate, whether it's brain mediated, GI mediated, or combination. You just can't control whatever that axis is of keeping your metabolic rate high enough, and you just add and you maintain, you hold reserves of nutrients in your body, and that's how you gain weight.
Yeah, but the only right now, Wegovy, which is the weight loss medication, semaglutide, is the only medication that's approved from insurance companies for cardiovascular disease and reduction of cardiovascular disease. So that's the one I've been able to prescribe a lot more. So I have the most
Okay.
experience with that because there's a cardiac indication for that. But some of the medications like Zepbound now have indications for sleep apnea, and I think a lot of them will get, because I'm doing a lot of those cardiovascular outcome trials. So I think a lot of them will eventually get the cardiovascular indication as well. But interestingly, a lot of these GLP-1s, GIP medications are becoming cardiac medications, and people know that cardiac disease is the number one cause of death in the world, and in our country especially, and obesity is a big component of that, and that's why cardiology is being targeted. The one big aspect of cardiology that's being targeted is this phenomenon called heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, where we have heart failure where the heart is squeezing well. The heart is not weak, but it's not relaxing as well because of obesity, because of the fat around the heart. And weight loss has significantly shown to improve the relaxation ability of the heart to be able to expand easily and intake a lot of the blood so it can squeeze well. And I'm seeing a lot of improvement in that heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. Those patients who have heart failure, even though the heart is not weak, with these medications. So that's exciting for me, because heart HFpEF, as we call it, did not have any real treatments as of yet.
That's pretty awesome. I mean, these medications are kind of like a revolution in terms of the ability to treat metabolism. I mean, it's like insulin was discovered in 1922, so it's just a little over 100 years ago. Basically, the first medication that was able to regulate metabolism in some way was invented, and now we have so many more. I mean, the speed with which science and discovery advances is crazy. Like an initial spark when insulin was found, and I mean really like changed completely the lives of all those patients with type 1 diabetes. It was basically a death sentence. um, and now you have these medications that are helping so many people in the population. They're not perfect, just like insulin isn't perfect, it has other effects too, but it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, man, it's exciting. And then I talked about HFpEF. You talked about type 1 diabetes. Now the other big condition that a lot of people struggle with, a lot of people have, is fatty liver disease. NASH, or as we now call it, MASH, metabolically mediated steatohepatosis. I can't speak
Yeah,
it, but
it's a hard word.
pretty much fatty liver that is because of metabolism. And these medications are at the forefront of treatment of MASH now, where the fatty liver is completely being reversed because of the significant weight loss. Because before, people would have fatty liver and doctors would just go lose some weight. Like, go lose some weight. What do you mean lose some weight? How? Like, what do I do? But now with
But
these
it was vague because doctors themselves didn't know. You know what I mean? Like doctors had no clue how to really counsel patients on what is weight loss, what is exercise, what is a good diet. They're just like, you're left to your own devices. Go figure it out. I'm just telling you, be healthy. Go
yeah,
do
be
it.
healthy. Go
Yeah,
eat right. Go eat
yeah.
right.
Good
Go
luck.
exercise. Go.
If you find out how, let me know.
Yeah, like, the patient would be so confused. Like, what do I do? I've been doing everything, but now,
I know.
MASH is becoming treatable with some of these, weight loss medications, and that's exciting because a lot of people might end up not getting the liver failure that they get because of the severe obesity that they have, and with weight loss, their NASH could be reversed. So that's exciting as well. So I think it's exciting, but I would like to caution. I mean, there's no such thing as free lunches, and we'll see where things go. But I think I'm going to be using these medications in patients that urgently need it, but maybe it could add many more years to their life, which might be heading the wrong direction right now. So I'm going to use it until I see something alarming or otherwise scary, because without these medications, some patients might not have a very long life left because they're very metabolically deranged, and their cardiovascular health is heading towards a place where things might not be as easy for them in the future.
Yeah, it's like a ticking time bomb. I know me personally, in terms of these medications, I'll continue to have fights with the anesthesiologists when they want to cancel cases. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, it is what it is. But it's just funny, from the perspective of surgery, and it's not just me being an orthopedic surgeon and like goofing off about it. Like it's so common with all surgeries that the number of cancellations. Because the patient is on these medications and the uncertainty around it is remarkable. But that's what happens with anything new, right? The advent of new technology creates uncertainty. There's more questions than answers when something new comes about because people don't know how to use it. That's something that it's so hard to predict. Here's something new. We have an idea what it does, but how it's going to be utilized, like these medications, initially for diabetes, just like the next step after insulin discovery, but they're being utilized for so much more.
Yeah, exciting times ahead, man. Well, we'll until then we'll keep hitting up some of the Houston restaurants.
Oh yeah, baby.
And
Try it out. I got to check out Theodore Rex.
yeah, you should, man. I think we can do another episode on just the restaurants that we like.
Oh, dude, we should. We should. Maybe we'll do it from the Hobbit Cafe. They're burgers, man. I'm telling you.
I don't think I've been there, so I'll have to
Oh,
try
really?
it out. Yeah.
Oh, dude, there we go. We got one each.
All right.
All
Perfect. All
right,
right.
guys. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Two docs, one mic.